This is part 2 of the metalwork and welding videos. We're going to talk now about tools. Here are some typical metalworking hand tools. We've got some ball peen hammers, which you've seen. And then you've seen most of these are actually for measuring or marking the steel or the metal that you're working with. These are the hand tools we're most likely to use around the shop. Of course, the ball peen hammer, which we've already talked about, which we've already seen. It's got the ball in the back there and the flat face in the front. It's for shaping metal, which we don't do a ton of in the theater. But then we've also got the hacksaw, which of course is for cutting through fairly thin pieces of metal or tubing. And then we've got tin snips, sometimes called aviation snips. Now the ones in the upper left there with the blue handle, those are pretty beefy, straight cutters. They'll cut some pretty thick stuff. The ones on the bottom right are more like what we have in the shop, a little bit lower grade, but still cut just fine. Now the reason they're different colors is that they do different things. The yellow handle there cuts straight. The green handle will cut in a right-hand curve, and the red handle will cut in a left-hand curve. You can use the yellow ones to try to cut in a curve, but it'll be a little bit jagged. So if you're cutting curved shapes, oftentimes you'll want one of the other ones. We don't do enough sheet metal work to really justify having a whole selection of tin snips, so we've got a straight cutting pair. These items you probably recognize, of course. This is a cold chisel. We use this for marking or cutting hot steel. A metal file. The metal file, just like a wood file, will take off burrs and kind of rough down the edges or shape or put marks in it or what have you. We have a vise, or also called a machinist's vise, and this is for gripping the crap out of something. You can see that it's got a flat gripper in the vise, and then below that you can see for curved or shaped or like tube or pipe. And you often need to grip something down to vise it down so you can hold it to cut it. And then finally, it's not just for cartoons. An anvil is actually a useful piece of metalworking equipment, but usually used for shaping hot metal. Again, we don't do that at Wake, but there are some shops that will do some metal shaping, maybe some place that makes their own weapons or hardware or something like that. Now, a couple of different other metalworking tools that you might see. Conduit bender. We have a few of these. Conduit is electrical metallic tubing. So basically metal tube that we run wires through, and you can bend it to shape. So next time you are at a box store or something like that where you can see the conduit on the wall for the electrical system, you'll see it's got bends in it. You do that with one of these guys. Why would we use that for the theater? Well, because we'll use that conduit to make different things. I've used conduit to make a shepherd's crook. You can use it to bend all kinds of shapes into the tube. Each of these conduit benders is going to have its own different head, that silver thing there, for the different diameters of the conduit it's bending. Center punches. Center punches are for making a mark in the metal, especially for drilling, because for those of you who have tried using the tech screws without a pilot hole, or if you've simply tried drilling a pilot hole right off the bat, what happens is the screw or the bit will travel around just because the metal is hard and it's slick. So you use a center punch and you hit it with a hammer, and it will put a little dent or a divot into the steel so that you can drill it or screw into it. Then we have the pipe cutter. We cut pipe with a lot of different things, and we'll see those in a minute, but this is a manual pipe cutter. And what happens is you put those two rollers on one side of a pipe and that kind of round blade cutter on the other side. You twist it down and it cuts into the pipe, and you roll that thing around the pipe, and then you tighten it some more, and you roll it around, and then you tighten it some more, and you keep doing that until it finally cuts through the pipe. This is a way to do it by hand if you can't take a big saw somewhere. And then we have a pipe threader. So you can see those things drop inside the middle of it for different diameter pipe. You can actually put thread on the ends of the pipe to screw different things on. Now let's talk about metalworking power tools. Some of these, some of you have already used. All of these should look familiar because they're all around our shop. This, of course, is the cutoff saw or the chop saw, sometimes also called an abrasive saw. It cuts through usually metal tube or bar or something like that. It gets clamped in there. So this is just like the chop saw that we use for wood. It won't turn to angles, but you can turn that clamp on an angle. So instead of turning the saw, you actually turn the clamp in this case. That big disc is abrasive, so that's how it cuts through the metal. It basically abrades it away. It grinds it away, which is why it makes lots and lots and lots of sparks. Kind of a quick and dirty way to cut through something very loud, very rough, and lots of sparks. The gentler way is with the horizontal bandsaw or the well saw. Well saw is a brand name, and I believe so called because it's got a well of cutting fluid in it. This is done by, it's basically a bandsaw hacksaw. So that blade is like a hacksaw, but it's on a continuous loop band, and gravity does the work. We put the pipe in there. You can see it's clamped there in the middle. In this case, the blade is like running right across the top third of it. And then you place that arm lifts up and you rest it on top. It has a lubricant. That's what's in that gray container, and that is what that trough in the front is for catching the lubricant, because basically it dumps it all over the blade so that it has a lubricant for cutting through the steel, so it doesn't get too hot, so it doesn't smoke, and so that it has an easier time cutting through whatever it's cutting through. And you basically let gravity do the work as it slowly will pull that blade through the steel. Now, similar to this, of course, but on a more portable level, is a portable bandsaw, or what we often call the Portaband. Now, this one is a Milwaukee brand. Ours is Makita, so it's blue instead of red. Still pretty much the same thing. You can see this one is actually corded, so you have to plug it in. Ours is battery powered, which is really nice. But again, same idea, cutting through tube or whatever you might have portably. So it could be up in the grid, or it could be out on stage, or it could just be because our well saw is broken. And a few other tools, some of which we have, some of which we don't. Power pipe cutter, you can see it's pretty much similar to the manual pipe cutter. It's just done with power. It's got a foot operator there. This would be for cutting through some much beefier pipe. The power pipe threader, just like that one by hand, but in this case you're doing it with a powered device that would spin the thread around. The bench grinder, which we do have a bench grinder, but it doesn't have safety equipment on it. It doesn't have the shield and that sort of thing on it, but it's used for grinding things down or polishing them or whatever. It sits on a bench or on a stand, so it's not kind of like this guy, the angle grinder. The angle grinder is more portable and has discs on there that might grind off burrs, or we can even cut through metal with the angle grinder, depending on what kind of a disc head you've got on there.